Welcome to The Leaders Who Care, a podcast powered by Dynamis Group. We are here to give the stage and support to those committed to create a positive and lasting impact, way beyond the profits and margins, the leaders of the world who care for others and serve a bigger purpose. Join us on the journey of creating a better, more caring world. And now to your host, Marian Temelkov.
Hello, everyone. Today we have a very special guest joining us. And as you know, we're on a mission to bring on the podcast some of the most caring leaders from every corner of the world. And today we have the honor to be joined by Ambassador Rae. Let me introduce you briefly. Mr. Rae has served as a Premier of Ontario, is Canada's most popular province, and he's been an interim leader of the Liberal Party of Canada and has been elected to federal and provincial parliaments 11 times. Mr. Rae has also received numerous awards and honorary degrees from institutions in Canada and around the world, and he's highly respected Canadian politician locally and globally. And due to the time limit, I'm naming just a few of his career milestones. Today, he serves as ambassador and a parliament representative of Canada to the United Nations in New York. I love the mission, of course, and what you do. And Mr. Rae's notable career in politics, along with his personal approach to leadership, have been his way of serving people and doing so with care. We see and recognize his true devotion and care for his country, its people, and beyond. And today we're honored to welcome Ambassador Rae to our caring leader communities and the podcast. Thank you, Ambassador Rae, for making the time and joining us today.
Good to be with you, Marian. Thank you very much. Good to share time with you.
First of all, how are you today?
I'm pretty good. It's been a very busy and emotional time at the UN. So no rest for the wicked, as we say. But so it's been long hours. But health-wise, I'm feeling fine. I'm good. I'm happy to be where I am. I'm enjoying this job. It's a difficult job, but it's one that I'm enjoying very much, and I feel very lucky to have been given the opportunity to keep going in a leadership role. I feel very, very happy being able to do that.
Well, I honestly honor the resilience and what you do, because you really need a lot of that in what you do on a daily basis. And Ambassador Rae, please take us back to the beginning of your journey as a leader. How did you decide to become a politician? How do you come to that really decision? But also, it's just a.
I don't think it's a kind of. I can't say there's one moment where this is I made a very conscious decision to do one thing or another. I think looking back at my childhood, I was a funny little boy. I loved music. I had lots of friends, but I was also a reader, and I think I would have to say, from a very young age, I was interested in public affairs and politically what was going on. I can remember when I was in primary school in Washington, D.C., because my dad was at the Canadian Embassy there, and I was in a public school called Horace Mann Public School, and in grade 4, we would have, everybody would have to get up and give a little presentation about, what was the news of the day or what they were doing, and other kids would report on normal activities, and I would give a report on, the French Algerian conflict, and nobody could understand what, and so people didn't know, like, what the heck is this all about? But I was just like that. I mean, that's what I did, and so very quickly after that, I mean, class president or various things like that, moving. And then the key moment, I think, in my life, the really formative moment, was when I went to an international school in Geneva, because my dad moved on to be ambassador to the UN in Geneva, and that's really where I felt I felt very much at home, and it was a wonderful experience being in an international school, being with kids from all over the world, engaging with them in all kinds of activities, Student United Nations, fundraising for UNHCR, doing all kinds of things. And I think most people, if you asked any of my classmates, are you surprised that Bob's still going and is ambassador to the UN? They'd say, no, of course not. That's exactly what we thought he would do. So I think it was pretty early on. And I'd have to say that I don't think I knew much about leadership at that time. I don't think I thought about leadership as a sort of thing, apart from just being myself. And I think it took quite a while for me to understand and appreciate what I think is the most important thing about leadership, which is that it's actually not about you. It's not about the ego. And I think that one of the things that many people in public life have to kind of come to grips with is that it's not about you. And if you want to be really effective, you have to learn how to care about other people, but also how to empower other people, how to see yourself as more as a mentor and a coach and an encourager and an advisor to other people, as opposed to somebody who's always got to have all the halos and lights and everything flowing down on you as a way of being a leader. So I would say that I made a lot of mistakes in the beginning. I'm sure.
We all did. We all do, and that's why I want to encourage people.
I'm sure I did, because I think in order to be a good leader, you have to have some ego. You have to have enough ego, self-confidence to put yourself forward. But if you have too much of it, then it gets in the way of everything else. And I've seen that often. And people, I think, would say to me, "Well, yeah, you showed that sometimes too." And I would have to admit that, on reflection, that's true.
It is really good to hear, because when I speak to some of the politicians or see some of them, of course, it's a difficult one, because sometimes you see more of a career, and it's not when you see it as a career, it's probably slightly different, because if you really look at you in politics to serve others through the policies you make and really making a positive difference to people's life. Of course, there's always controversy, because whenever you have one policy may affect others, so you have to look at the greater good. And just really, I'm thinking, what makes, especially in your situation, when you look at affecting millions of people, what makes one a caring leader, and especially in the political sector? What qualities and traits are important from your personal experience?
Well, I don't think of what I do as a career. I think of it as a vocation. Which may sound corny. I mean, people may say, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Well, it is a bit of a calling." And whenever I get asked by lots of younger people, of all ages, frankly, about what would I recommend, how should they get into politics, and how should they do this or do that? And my advice is always the same. It's to say, you have to remember this one basic thing, that if it's not about something bigger than you, something you actually believe in, then it's of no interest to anybody else but you. And you will become a narcissistic leader. You will be a leader that ultimately it can be quite poisonous. I mean, I think we've all encountered narcissism in ourselves, and we've encountered it in other people. And whenever you find it, you have to root it out, because it's a pathology that is often associated with leadership. And it's one of the dark sides of leadership. I think that therefore you have to always be testing yourself. As what do I believe in more than about whether I get this job or that job. I've had some good jobs, and I haven't succeeded at getting other jobs. I don't think that's frankly that important, as much as my being consistently honest with myself and with others about what I'm trying to accomplish, what we're all trying to accomplish in some team effort. So invariably, it's about It's about team, and it's about others, and it's about understanding that a healthy project, a healthy positive leadership project of one kind or another, really involves working with other people, and it's not just about the I. It's not to make it too complicated, but the I is important, because if you don't believe in yourself, then you're not going to be able to convince anybody else about anything. So there's always this element of ego. People say you're putting yourself forward, or you're pushing, and you say, yeah, it's right. That's part of what it's about. But it can't be the only thing, because if it's the only thing, then, as I say, it gets wrong. It goes bad. And I think it's really important to remember that. So my advice to everybody is tell me what you care about. Don't tell me about yourself. I mean, happy to hear where you went to school, what you did, but tell me, what do you really care about? And then at that point, you're really testing someone's authenticity. Are they being real? Do they really care about this, or do they not care about it? Do they really care about anything? And I think the capacity to care for others, the ability to love, the ability to show empathy, the ability to be selfless when you need to be selfless, is really some of the most important human virtues. Because without those virtues, everything simply becomes a game of seeking power for its own sake, and then you inevitably abuse power for its own sake. You become corrupted by it. And it's interesting, as I get older, I realize, hearing myself talk, I mean, I sound like a kind of preacher of some kind. And I'm not driven by any religious certainty or of any kind. But I do believe that it's really important to have strong values that you actually are prepared to apply to your own conduct, and to judge yourself by them when you've clearly failed. And I think that's something that's really, really difficult, but important for us all to be able to do.
Well, thank you for sharing that topic. I have a saying, and when pride gets on the way, or prideness is followed by destruction. So the moment you get, and someone said to me, actually, of course, there's certain element of ego and so forth, but because if you don't have ego, that means you're completely depressed and you have absolutely no confidence in what you do, or you're at such a high level that you're absolutely above everything that's happening, which is very rare to see, obviously, in effectiveness in some shape or form. So I think it's very important. But as you grow, as you go higher, I have my personal principle that the higher I personally go, the more I should be on my knees, because the winds will not catch you. You will be strong. I will be honest to you, personally, what I work, and I'm grateful for God's blessing and what He does. But it's very important that we're here to serve. And I love what you said. What do you care about? What do you set your heart on fire? And that's such a great question to ask anyone, because that defines the moment of why do you want to go and do that. And if you don't have that why very cleared out for you, well, you may be there for a very rough ride. And and here you'll be probably more defending yourself. And it leads me to my next question, which, let's talk about resilience. Being in politics or really politician encounters, some say, is a very thankless job. And I speak to a lot of senior leaders and executives in business, especially, because that's what I love, impacting communities through business. And I ask them, you are such a fantastic leader, care, build a global organization and make a profound impact. Have you ever considered going into politics? And they said, absolutely no way. And I said, why? Because, you can bring so much value. And of course, it's not for everyone, because how do you endure through that pressure, high expectations, judgment, criticism, but also that sometimes you wake up crazy hours, and especially I can imagine, like you mentioned this morning, you're waking up, and so I'm just trying to think that it requires quite a lot because I can imagine constantly somebody has a knife at the behind your back, and you got to be very careful what you do, where you do it, and make sure that you really serve and make a difference. So that's just even having that pressure from mental point of view. How do you deal with that, and how do you kind of be effective, because you are for so many years and you've done some amazing things in your career?
Well, I think resilience is a very, very necessary quality. There's no question about it. I mean, the ability to believe enough in yourself that you can just pick yourself up again after you've been knocked down, you've lost an election, you've lost something hasn't happened the way you wanted it to go, you've suffered a setback in your career, the job path that you're on. And I think that's really where it comes down to. The key word for me is well, I guess there's a few things, but one of them is perspective, mental perspective. And I think I'm very open with my co-workers now when I talk to them and say, look, from the moment I went through it, 50 years ago, I was going through a very serious period of anxiety and depression in my life as a young, very relatively young man in my early 20s. And I was really in a valley. I couldn't work effectively. I couldn't relate to other people well. I was, I kept a little notebook at the time, and the script in the notebook is very, very tiny and scratchy, and clearly my whole sort of sense of myself was very inward looking and not happy. But would say not happy is not describe it, because depression is not about happy or unhappy. It's some other mode that you're in, and the anxiety attacks were really strong. So how did I get out of that? Well, with a lot of help, frankly, with a lot of help from friends, with help from therapy, and help from family, and everybody being very understanding and really trying to help me come to grips with the fact that I was being really hard on myself. And that it wasn't anybody else being hard on me. It wasn't like, you project onto your parents, you project onto someone else, so you project onto a situation. And one of the signs of mental illness, I think, is an inability to understand that actually this is about you. This is about me. It's not about what somebody else is doing to me. It's about what I'm doing to myself. And it takes a long time to get through that. And I was lucky enough to go through it, and to go through it at a young age. And at an age when I think it really strengthened me, because although coming out of it took time, and I don't think you ever say I'm quote cured, because I think that's a wrong way of looking at it. It's all about it being on a sort of on a spectrum, and you're moving out of a bad zone into a better zone, and then it gets better. But if you don't want it to go too crazy, because then you flip right back again. So I think that's helped me, and it may sound strange to be as open about it, but I really think it's important for people who are in leadership positions to admit that frailty and failure are part of life, and therefore you have to be kind to yourself. Above all, you have to be kind to yourself about that experience and understand it better. And so that's for mental resilience. And character resilience, and also understanding that virtue is important, but it's also should never go to the point of expecting yourself to be perfect. And one of the things that I've noticed in people that I encourage or try to help or try to encourage them to do better at what they're doing, or to deal with some dysfunction that's happening in their life or in the office or something. One of the things that I notice a lot is perfection really is a monkey on our back. It's a really bad monkey, because it drives us to want to do things and be things that we can't be, and it's not a good thing. Being somebody says I'm a perfectionist, I just say, uh-oh, I'm really worried, because it doesn't work. The other thing is humor, and I think and music, and the ability to enjoy something else, the ability to play. Can you play at something? Can you play at whether it's golf or tennis or checkers or Wordle or whatever? Can you just play? Can you for a few moments of a day just be idle and have fun like a kid, like be a child? And that's really important. I think we very rarely do we give ourselves the opportunity. I mean, I know there are many people who say, oh, I like to play, but the way they play is like not playing. They're competitive. They want to win. They throw their golf club. They smash their tennis racket, whatever. I mean, you sort of say that's not playing. That's what you do all the time. But joking, laughing, telling jokes, listening to jokes, watching things that make you laugh, hugely important. And I've had the luck of growing up in a very musical family. My father particularly was a wonderful musician, and I associate so many good things with my childhood with singing and listening and playing songs, playing the piano and listening to other music and dancing, all that stuff. And I still do. I still like to dance. I still like to listen to music and get a lot of pleasure out of it. So I think those things all help build resilience, plus staying in reasonable shape. I'm, like everybody of my age, I'm a few pounds overweight, but I try to stay healthy as humanly possible without giving up too many of the pleasures of life.
I love that. Because it's 1st of April, we're planning to start with a joke so we can laugh a little bit, with what's going on. And I really love what you said. Whatever we do, I always have two principles that I abide to when I encounter or have a conversation with. Well, try to do it with almost everyone. Of course, not always easy, but because it depends on your mental state and so forth. But I always ask myself, what are the two things that I ask is, what value did I add by having this conversation today with this person, this gentleman or lady? And then ask, how did I make them feel about the interaction we had? And when you have those two, because it's two things, is the feeling is important. Let's face it, nobody wants to be miserable all the time. If, as you said, listening to music or having a few jokes, it just opens up so much. But it can be just about that either. It's what value do you bring to the table and the equation? I think it's what you're saying is we all learn from our mistakes and resilience. So thank you for sharing that situation back in the days, how you went through it, because a lot of people just see you and say, wow, he's done X, Y, and Z, but they don't necessarily know what goes beyond and what are the hardships that you had to go through and to get to where you are. And what you're saying, of course, is, in fact, if anything, this is very healthy to have this crisis, because that builds you up. The most important is to make sure that you have a network or a way to get out of it. I really I love that. And I always want to talk about just addressing some of the people around the world, that there are a lot of great people that are thinking, do I want to get into politics? I'm very excited about the future of politics, by the way. I think this is one of the areas that will be disrupted massively in the coming years. And here's what I think why. Of course, it requires a lot of experience, no joke, but I see all these influencers around the internet. Some of them have a few 100 million followers. And probably won't be that long before we see somebody in their 30s becoming a president of the United States or Canada. And just say, well, so the question is whether they want it or not and what goes beyond it. But what would be your words to people that are thinking about going into it and genuinely want to serve and make a positive impact?
Well, it's not for the weak of heart. I mean, it is challenging, and it's become more challenging, I think, in many respects, because of the technology and the media in which we function. It is, you are going to get criticized not by a few people or a few hundred people or a few thousand people. You're going to get criticized by millions of people, and you can go very quickly from being unknown to being notorious in a few seconds. One click on a button, and you've either said something or done something, or somebody's seen you say or do something of which people completely disapprove. And I have to say, I spent most of my life in politics in Canada, elected politics, before the internet, or just the last little while when I was in my last stint in federal politics in Canada was obviously I had a Twitter account and all that stuff starting up again. But it was a new world. And now, of course, at the UN, it's part of how you have to communicate. I believe as a diplomat, you cannot refuse to engage on social media. I accepted your invitation to join this program because I think it's important that we be able to talk about these questions and about leadership. However, having said all of that, I think that really good political leadership is essential. Leadership is an essential thing. It isn't just enough to take a poll or to add up the votes and say we're going to do this because everybody wants to do this. And you could say, well, yeah, but everybody could be wrong, and everybody could be basing it on bad information and on misinformation. And now we have to say on disinformation because of the deliberate misuse and abuse of technology to spread lies and hatred and say things that are just not true. And that's a challenge we face in today's world very, very acutely. I think disinformation and the systematic spreading of lies and the use of propaganda is one of the critical issues of our time. So if you don't have people who are brave enough to say, I'm going to take this on and I'm going to try to live my life in a way that is about facts and arguments and the case for the public and what is the public good, then you're abandoning the field to others. And it was a famous British conservative 200 years ago, Edmund Burke said, I mean, all it takes for the triumph of evil is for good men, as he put it at that time, but good people to do nothing. And so if we all sit back and say, well, I'm not sure I can do that, or it's too disruptive for me. It's not my life. I want to stay. I want to do this job. I don't want to put my head above. That's too bad, because there are a lot of good people who don't go into politics because they say, oh, it's just so messy and difficult. But in reality, it's everything we do is messy. Running a company is messy. Running a business can be messy, and increasingly publicly difficult and challenging. So I don't think politics is uniquely messy. But what I do think is it requires a certain kind of skill set that actually people should not make the mistake of thinking, oh, that's easy, I could do that. And you sort of say, no, it's not. It's not that easy. Because I know a lot of people who've gone into politics later when they're 50s or 60s, saying, oh, I can do this. I've succeeded in a bunch of other things. There aren't that many people who really succeeded in business who actually end up doing well in politics because they don't necessarily understand all of the elements of how it works. There are many people who are very bright, intelligent academics or whatever, and they think they can do this because they sort of think they are aware of the arguments. But politics is about emotion. It's not only about intellect. It's about character. It's about ability to lead, to be consistent, to be strong, to be clear as best you can, and to have an ability to be nimble, to pivot. And there are many people who go into politics with an ideology in their head or with a number of very fixed views. And they come in thinking that their fixed views are going to win over everybody else. And it doesn't happen. I mean, I'm not going to mention any names, but I've seen it. I've seen it up close, and it doesn't work. And so you have to say there's something to be said for somebody who's decided not to be a celebrity necessarily, not to be hugely wealthy, because you don't get wealthy in politics. You don't necessarily become a celebrity like somebody who chooses to sell a product on the internet or something. But you do know how government works, and you do have way of saying, how can I persuade enough people that this is the direction we need to shift in? And there are some very gifted politicians who, in my view, retired too early and, could have kept on going because they really had a very necessary gift. And people said, oh, well, he's past the age now, he should move on. And you look at him and say, I mean, there was a time, I think, in the 19th century when political leaders just carried on. I mean, in our country, in Canada, most of the prime minister, the early prime ministers, all died in office. They just stayed and they just kept going because that's what they did. That was their vocation. It wasn't a career. It was them. It was who they were.
I love what you said. A lot of gifted leaders that should have stayed in politics for a longer time. And who are those figures or the one or two leaders in politics that inspired you, that are a role model for you?
I wouldn't say well, inspired me. I mean, I would say a number of people. I think as a kid, I was 12 years old when President Kennedy was elected in 1960. So he was sort of, in a sense, my first political sort of hero, in the sense of somebody that I saw on a screen and listened to his speeches and watched how he spoke. And I think he's had a huge influence on political style and also on political communication. We now know more about him than perhaps we'd like to know, and he realized how imperfect, like all of us, he really is. But I would still say that was somebody that you look at and say, yeah, that defined sort of the politics of that time. I learned over the years to really admire Angela Merkel, watching her. And I've never met her, but I really think she's quite an extraordinary person and gifted, driven by values, but also by a sense of practicality, and really very compassionate and tough. I think she's made some mistakes, and did some things I wouldn't have agreed with, and some things that I think she probably now would say, yeah, might have done it differently. But I really have I felt for a long time that she was one of the truly outstanding leaders in the Western world at a time when you don't necessarily have that many people who are truly outstanding and made a big difference and a big impact on people. And certainly she still has a continuing role to play. I mean, when I was talking about people leaving too early, she's an example of somebody who say, why would you go? I mean, you're the best at what you do. And of course, popularity goes up and down, and you understand people say, well, now, enough already. I've served long enough. I have to. But I hope that Angela Merkel finds a role to play, because I think she has a tremendously important role to play. And it would be regrettable if she felt, well, now I've done that, I know I have to do something else. Just retire, and I'm not allowed to say anything because it might interfere with what other people are doing. And that to me is, would not be good. So those are a couple of people. I mean, obviously historical figures. I mean, I spent a long time studying and the career of Winston Churchill, and I did a lot of things about Churchill that I completely disagree with, and his whole views on imperialism and views on the British Empire and a whole bunch of other issues, domestic politics in the United Kingdom and so on. But at one critical moment in time in human history, he stood his ground, and he made an incredible difference in the life of the world. And I don't think the modern world would be the same without his leadership and his determination. But as I say, it's not about perfection. It's not about saying, oh, I really just only admire this person for what they are. And finally, and most important of all, I would say the leader that I think for me, has given me the most inspiration in my life, and for whom I would walk over coals, is Nelson Mandela. I see in him such grace and such courage, such dignity, and the thing that above all stands out for me is his refusal to allow anger and resentment and bitterness to turn him away from what he knew was the necessary path. I mean, think about it. A man who was in jail for 26 or 7 years, got out when he was in his 70s, and really had been robbed of the whole middle part of his life in terms of what he could have done as a political leader, and then is thrown onto the world stage and onto the stage of his country, and is not in the greatest of health or shape, and knows what he has to do and does it, and then also knows that he has to hand it over to someone else because he's getting older and he's got, he can't carry on indefinitely. But I think his message to the world and his message of leadership has just been profound. And I always, people say, what book should I read? I said, you have to read Nelson Mandela's autobiography. You have to read that book because it tells you so much about his life and about racism and about what racism has done to the world and the impact that it's had on people. And also because he's such a powerful moral presence, not by virtue of being perfect. I mean, his life was, personal life, I'm sure was complicated, but he stood for something and he believed in it and he fought hard for it. And he gave up many, many years of his life in dedication to it. So I think he's just an unusually powerful model for anybody who wants to think about what it's like. But then you say, well, then how could I be like that? And the answer is probably not in the way you think, but it's all about how do you behave in your life? How do you deal with your life situations? Leadership is not something only about something that's out there. Leadership is in us. I mean, it's in all of us. Everybody can be a leader in something, whether it's in your family or your church or your whatever, wherever you are. You always can play a leadership role. You don't have to assume that leadership, there's no cult of leadership. Leadership isn't something that only belongs to other people, but leadership is all about having a vision, having moral values, persuading people of the rightness of a certain course or cause of action, developing followers, listening to other people, changing your mind, working with them, working it forward, and then executing, getting it done. So all those things together make up leadership. So it applies to everything we do in life, whether we're doing the laundry or anything else. It's just still there as a quality.
I love, this is, first of all, thank you for giving me those examples. And I was just listening attentively because I love that, man. Nelson Mandela to me is a role model and someone that probably, or for the audience that while Nelson Mandela was in prison, they kept changing the guards every 3 months or so because the guards were starting to like him so much that they were afraid that they might let him go. So it was that powerful, this man, and it's just the grace, the ability to serve others, and he made a choice: either I'll die here, and people will rise after me because they've seen what I've done, or I'll get out of here, and I better be prepared. And he kept planning for that time in prison, and he did it for good purpose. And it's phenomenal. That very different styles. I honor a lot of what Churchill did. Angela Merkel, of course, she's still amongst us, and we need her to do a lot more. Hopefully, she will. Churchill, I remember some of the key moments from what I've read about him is he kept like on a 24/7, and he kept sleeping like every 15 minutes or so because it's a war. So it's like a continuous, and he had an amazing resilience. And he knew he wasn't the best man to post-war, but he was the best man for the job probably during the wartime. And I just really thank you for sharing those examples of great leadership in politics and that shaped the world when we needed them. And it comes me to my next question, which is about balance. How do you balance professional with personal life? Because to me, when we finish work, and I'm still to get there, but I want to do much better. When we go home, we should serve. This is the best. If it's in business, the best client, the most important client is your family. In politics, these are your election. They elect you. They empower you. So how can we serve our family and the hard work? How do you balance professional and personal life?
Well, it's hard. I mean, I think the first thing you have to admit is that it's hard. I mean, because by definition, if you're in a you feel called to be in political leadership, you that in a sense sets you apart a little bit. And so I think it's a challenge because you have to also realize that it's not all you are, and you're also a human being, and you have people that I have people that I love very much and that I care for and are more important to me than anything. And so you have to find ways to show that, and you also have to find ways to share normal times with people, which I do. I have very good friends. I have friends that I've had since I was a child. My best friends today are the best friends that I had when I was 5, 6, 7 years old. They still are. And some people say that's unusual. I say, I don't know if it's unusual or not, but it's just true. And we've all gone on to do different things, and we talk to each other and send each other emails and jokes and play golf together or whatever. And it's a nice feeling to have. So I have a family life, and we have a summer cottage in Canada where we go. Our whole family goes. It's a place of great emotion because members of the family have gone. Some have gone and died and left us, and others are here, and new families are growing. So there's a whole group of cousins and an expanded family that are together. That's hugely important for me. It's a huge source of sustenance for me, and I hope for them. I hope they can get a sense of enjoyment out of it as well. I'm lucky to have been married to the same person for 42 years, and we are always together and doing things together and learning from each other and going through many ups and downs in life, physical, mental, emotional. And I've been very lucky to have had the benefit of that relationship. And I know it's a gift. I mean, and it's largely my wife's gift, thank goodness, to really keep that spirit very much alive in our marriage and in our time together.
First of all, I want to give honor to your wife. I want to give honor to your wife, for really putting up with you through all those years. But
children and grandchildren, and so those things are the things that keep you going. I play sports. I like to read. I watch movies. I do all kinds of things like everybody does and enjoy them. But I do think it's a challenge to find the right balance, and I think again, I think having suffered that period of anxiety, I think also having gone through a political defeat when I was in my early 40s was good, because it forced me to recognize that there's other things you can do. There are other jobs you can do in your life of public service of some kind or other. And so if you think of your life as not as being this job or that particular moment, and understand that you're going to have jobs and then you're going to have a life. And as part of that life is obviously what I call my vocation, which is working for the public good in some way. And how that gets defined can be very broad. I mean, sometimes I teach, sometimes I write, sometimes I speak. Sometimes I do different things. Sometimes I get paid for it. Sometimes I don't get paid for it. And as I get older, I get paid less. And that's all these things are fine. But it's just about putting it in perspective. And also, I mean, this has been a fairly serious conversation, but not taking yourself too seriously. And luckily, in addition to the gift of music, I think my father also gave me the gift of humor. He was a very funny man. He was truly a funny man. And I think sometimes funny people are underestimated because they think, oh, he's such a joker. But it wasn't that he was a joker. It's that he needed that outlet in order to be able to put his life in perspective and to give it some meaning. And if he hadn't had that gift, I think he would have had emotionally had a much harder time. And I feel the same way, that I need the humor and often directed at myself to kind of put everything in balance. And if I didn't have that, I think it would be pretty grim. But it's all good. It's all good.
Change comes when we are together, when we are more united, and we have a lot of business leaders and entrepreneurs listening to the podcast and in our community. What would be your message to them? What business can do to improve that process when we do a positive change? How can business and politics work hand in hand so we could unite?
Well, I think for me, the thing about people to remember about business is it like politics, it's about people. It only succeeds if people succeed, and if people don't succeed, it's not going to work, not going to be successful. So that's why the things that matter in business are the same things that matter in politics, and the same things can go wrong in both places. If people are honest, if people are trustworthy, if the products they make are good, if what they're selling is real, if what they're making is good and positive and serves a useful public purpose, great. That's what it's all about. And so when people say to me, "Oh, business is bad," and you just say, "No, business is bad. Business is what happens." Any more than government is bad. No, government, it's all about whether they're doing it right and how they're doing it and how it works. So it takes you back to the basic virtues. Are you honest? Are you making something that's worthwhile? Are you doing something that's worthwhile? Can you justify what you're doing? Say, yeah, this is in the public interest, or this is in general interest. This is something that helps people. And I think it's really important for us to continue to apply those tests to what we do. And also just to break down the silos. There's too many silos between all of us doing what we do, between governments, different levels, city, province, national, international, and what people do to make a living, how they make a living, is whatever they're selling services, they're selling products, they're creating new apps, they're applying new forms of artificial intelligence, whatever they're doing. How does this work? How does it help? And explaining it to other people. The final thing, of course, is communication. George Bernard Shaw said something really smart once. He said, the biggest mistake we make in communication is assuming that it's already happened. Most people don't know what you do. They've no idea. And so you have to tell them. And you have to tell them what you've done. And you have to tell them while you're doing it. And then you say, I've done it. And that process of communication has to be constant. And above all, it has to be honest. And as I said, I worry a lot about where things are not honest these days. And I think it's a critical challenge.
I love it. And when I look at the future, and especially the future of leadership, how do you see the future of leadership, and what role care has to play in it?
Well, I think caring is really an extension of the conversation that we've had, because it's about worrying about consequences as opposed to listening to our impulses. There's a lot of examples. I mean, we are encouraged in today's world to be very impulsive. Every message coming at us drives us to give an instant answer, and sometimes it'll come up on your screen, yes, no, agree, just whatever, and you're sort of having to constantly respond. And impulsive behavior is very dangerous because it's not thinking, it's not reflective, it's just zoop. So thinking about consequences and understanding the importance of consequences is what mature leadership is all about. That's what mature caring is all about. Caring about other people means caring about consequences for yourself and for others of whatever behavior you're engaged in. And I think that's something that is about the past of leadership, the present of leadership, and the future of leadership. But it's even more important now when we understand that the technology that surrounds us is a technology that leads to impulse. It's not a technology that leads to consequential thinking. And so caring is a critical part of consequential thinking. You're thinking, your point that you made, Marian, about, you're asking yourself the question, how is this person feeling about this conversation? How is this conversation adding to life, to this person's situation? That's an example of consequential thinking. That's an example of caring thinking. And I think it doesn't matter how technologies change over time, or the kind of world we're moving into, whatever it is, whether you're in politics or whether you're in any part of life, thinking about things in those ways really matters. So when we look, for example, at current politics, the politics of what's happening, wars that are taking place, we need to get our leaders to say, you've got to think about the consequences. You've got to think about the caring, and that is a critical part of being a grown-up, and it's a critical part of providing caring leadership. And unfortunately, we don't see enough of it right now. So we have to keep on working at it.
Thank you so much. To conclude, really, that today's episode has been fantastic to have you. Any final words to our audience and to the current leaders of today and around the world?
No, I think I'm good. My father used to say, you got to know when to get off the stage.
I love that. Well, thank you so much, Master Rae. It's been an honor to have you, and really taking the time to share those insights with our audience. Have a great, fantastic weekend, and
You too. Thank
amazing
you.
year.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.